Thanks all for being here. I think I know most people in the room, but I'm Emma. I'm the curator here at the museum, and I'm very, very excited for the opening night of Peter Krashes' show, Passage Through. Peter and his husband Oliver have been in my life since I was a wee babe, before I could legally order a drink at a bar. I worked in Oliver's studio when I was in college and met Peter then. So we've had this long relationship. I've worked with Oliver at Cuesta when I was running the gallery there for a residency program, and now I get to work with Peter here at the museum. So it feels really special for me to have these gentlemen here in this community and to be presenting their work, their thinking, the way that they talk about their practice, and the way that Peter and I have worked together on the ideas behind this show is very special. So I'm thrilled to have him here. I don't think I see Allie from Frameworks, but I wanted to give her some love, so maybe we can give her some love without her being here. She generously donated most of the framing for this show, and it looks so good, and it's so elegant, and it was so much work. They've been working hard for like a month to get everything, because we wanted to give Peter plenty of time to finish the work. And anyway, so let's give an Allie a round of applause. Super grateful for that. I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to let Peter sort of share some of the ideas behind the work, and then we'll open it up to questions. I'm sure I'll have more questions that draw out the show, so I'll let him share a little bit.
Thanks. And by the way, just feel free to interrupt me at any point, because I think it might actually help open up the work a little bit in terms of how I explain it. But the work in the show is all derived from essentially one neighborhood, or even a couple blocks in a neighborhood in Brooklyn over the course of almost 20 years, or now more than 20 years. So the smallest works in the show are from around 2007 and 2008, and most recent ones, which is why Allie was waiting, are from 2006.
Allie, who just walked in, we just gave you a round of applause.
Yeah. I've been an activist in my neighborhood, which is a very changing place. It's always in a state of transition. New York is like that anyway, but we're in a neighborhood that has had some major developments in it, and just who is in the neighborhood, everything has changed over the course of several decades. And so, and I've been involved as a resident and as a member of the community. I've been attending community meetings and just getting engaged in every possible way. And so what you see in this show are a kind of a combination of things. One, especially in the earlier work, observations from public meetings, and typically kind of more intimate observations, like you see here, like looking over somebody's shoulder at them filling out a crossword. But you also, by the end, I'm really kind of more almost landscape-based. I'm looking at the changes on a landscape level, seeing change. And so if you look at each of these works, you will see some element of time suggested. You'll see some different, and it's expressed in different ways, whether it's like a wall like here, where there's mending and things being repaired, and the bird it's a bird in flight. It's the flight of a bird, not actually just a bird. Or a tree growing through a fence, or in fact, just even the trees having buds. So there's kind of a kind of focus in what I think we talk about in the press release is just interstitial spaces, things that are in between, that are overlooked, because I think there's so much meaning to be mined in those spaces. And you see how something can be, something that's overlooked can actually end up being as poignant or as expressive about a place as the things on either side of it that we tend to look at. And that's not just spaces, but also events. So likewise, in an event, looking at something that's not the subject of a meeting, but actually the intimate human scale things that are occurring in the meeting that nobody is actually paying attention to.
Do you want to speak to the small birds? We spent a lot of time thinking about this wall and how to arrange those works in conversation with each other. Some of the three smallest works are some of the oldest in the show.
Right.
And then the birds are some of the newest
Right.
in the show. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about how you're thinking about that wall in particular as a sort of lens to this work, but also to the rest of the
Yeah, so there's a couple of different answers to that. So the first element is that, like, when you look at the smaller pieces, you can kind of see keys to what's occurring elsewhere in the show. So, like, the lower piece is of a construction worker advocating in a public meeting, and so I kind of obviously highlighted the orange because he was wearing a construction vest to tell everybody that he was advocating for jobs.
And the orange is actually, you can follow
Right.
the orange throughout the show in a nice way.
Yeah, so there's an orange in a lot of these pieces, whether it's construction safety cones or safety vests. There's elements of that everywhere here. Like all three of those are really from public meetings, so you can start finding the public meetings occurring in some of these pieces, or the areas that are being discussed. But the birds came about, because I think what's happened in some ways is that if as an advocate I was really thinking a lot when I started about what I was, the messages and what I was arguing for, by now I would call myself a retired activist, very smartly so. It's more about human experience and living in a place and kind of accepting changes as being part of getting old, and a neighborhood's evolution is always going to evolve. So there's kind of an acceptance, a sense of loss and grief on the one hand, but also of sometimes joy or pleasure or empowerment. And the birds, what's nice for me about the birds is that in each of their states of flying, there's a kind of motion. So there's this, as I was talking about before, I'm capturing time inside of the piece, time evolving, the wings flapping. And as a painter, that kind of connects with the way that I paint, which is fluid and with mark making. So the brush is kind of following the movement of the bird in some ways. So that way that there's time elements in all the pieces. If you see the brush in the work or the empty expressed pieces of paper behind the paint, that's all in some ways about something being filled or something being empty, but also about the time of putting down the paint,
Any questions from the group?
Yeah. So what is the neighborhood?
It's called Prospect Heights in Brooklyn. It's a neighborhood that is sort of a mixture of brownstone. What you see is pictures of Brooklyn, but then it's also what was at one time a large manufacturing area, and the manufacturing areas are being rezoned for major development.
And they're nearby, is it in Prospect Heights that there's a massive stadium?
Right, so a lot of this is about a larger development that was 22 acres for a single project. It included a basketball arena and at the time 6,000 units of housing, maybe becoming 9,000 units of housing before it's over with. Yeah, it's still, but one of the elements of it has been delayed. So for years and years, in some ways, that idea of transition and change comes from the observation of things not occurring, like that things don't always occur the way people plan. So there's always this kind of questioning and waiting.
Plus it's a mockingbird.
Yes, it's a mockingbird.
Right, I forgot about that. Yeah, so these are mockingbirds here and over there. And the mockingbird is, I don't know if everyone knows what a mockingbird is. Are they in California?
I think so.
Yeah, yeah. So there's been a mockingbird in almost every neighborhood I've lived in Brooklyn, and that's been since 1990, or even near where I live. And so, and mockingbirds mimic the sounds that they hear in their environment. So they will mimic other birds, but they also mimic urban sounds. It can be a car alarm, or a fire engine, or a jackhammer. And so you get a mix, and they're quite virtuosic. If you listen, you can probably find them online. If you listen to a mockingbird's call, it's very, very virtuosic. So in some ways, I kind of connect that with being an advocate or even just being in a community because you're absorbing. But these are silent paintings. There isn't any sound to a painting. So
Really silent.
yeah, they're very silent. So I like that idea that there's something that's specifically known for its voice, but it's the voice element is not in the piece itself.
You had
Oh, when I walked in, I immediately felt the palette of Philadelphia, well, I lived in Philadelphia, New York for a long time, and I immediately felt it. And they even talked about the smell of the rain on brick.
Yeah, that was
So I'm wondering about your choosing the medium of gouache.
Oh, so initially, like with the smaller pieces, when I was working with gouache, they were studies for oil paintings, and I'm really, principally in my career, which has been pretty long, a lot of it was oil painting. And, but what's happened, I think, is that the gouache has kind of supplanted that as this body of work has grown. And so these are the finished pieces, and the gouache is a water-based medium like watercolor, but it's opaque. So when you put paint down with gouache, it's flat. It was used as a medium that for advertising in the 1950s, so they'd use the gouache to photograph, because it's matte, it doesn't have a reflection. They would photograph the piece and then turn it into an advertisement. And I like that kind of matter-of-factness for these pieces because part of me is sort of an engineer or something. So I like the idea that what I'm doing is unromantic, and that the romantic element's not coming from that's in the work is really from the gesture and the thoughts, and not from the paint itself. I don't know if I'd say it the same way again, but that's what I said this time.
Very well said.
Hopefully somebody recorded it.
No, I love this, and gouache is romantic.
It is. That's why I said I didn't know. It's like it's a very, very beautiful medium.
I
Yeah.
love gouache. What I've been noticing in a lot of these is you kind of created this scrim and this barrier and fence for the viewer. And so we have these incredibly intimate moments, and snapshots and croppings, but at the same time you kind of created a barrier of entry, and it creates kind of an emotional distance or even a loneliness. Is that part of the staging that when you're thinking about these shots?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different elements to the answer I would give to that question. So the most basic one is that there's a lot of barriers in the work. Like
That was one of the potential titles, was like something barriers.
Right.
That's the first thing I saw.
Yeah, I've actually, over the years, focused on the idea of kind of reaching across a barrier, touching somebody. I had a show called Contact. And so when you see that in this work, you see an interaction with the barriers. So that's one element. You'll see people reaching over it, but you also see a bird flying over a barrier. But I also like to think about my work as being very, very observational. It's obviously very observationally based. And so that when you as a viewer are standing in a place, you have to think a little bit about where you are. So like in a piece like this, which looks kind of straightforward, in fact, the wall is assembled by me. So it's a real wall. But if you really look at it, it doesn't make any sense. The bricks are at different scales than they ought to be, and sometimes oriented wrong. I want to create this kind of knowledge that the observer is consciously in a place, but it's confusing. Where are you there? And I think it's inherently part of like the idea of an interstitial space, a space that's in between, that you're not looking at it. So I try to bring that into it as well.
Counting the bricks?
Well, there's a course here, this course,
Yeah.
which is put down, the bricks are like this, and usually 7 courses above, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that is right here. So
But you're counting on something being well constructed, which is not. This is genuinely a wall, and it looks quite a bit like this. But and some of it is kind of like if you really look, like you see seams going straight up, and you're like, that's not safe. If we were in an earthquake zone, this would probably not pass muster. Yeah. But yeah, I'm glad you asked about the like that's consciousness of I, for a long time, have made these pieces, long before even this body of work, where there's a focus on the subjective, like you're, as an artist, making an image that's yours, and because these are, they look like they're from the outside world, that's part of my way of kind of expressing that this is personal, is that choice of what's in the way. Like even in this piece here, there's a tree, there's a tree branch with a bud as the foreground, and it's out of focus. Very photographic, but it obstructs. Yeah.
Any other questions?
You say you're retired. I'm curious, because I once dealt with Community Board 5. I mean, I know the community board system in New York. That's part of it. How hard was that a choice for you to make, and are you really ever out of it?
Well, I think, I should have, it's a constant state of exasperation and exhaustion, which has gone on over decades. I've never, been rewarded in any way for it. And except for the personal contacts and the relationships that you develop. And a lot of what we did, or I was involved with, was just a group of us pulling together and bringing a community that we were literally right on the edge of this development. So we were on one side of the street, the properties were demolished, and on our side of the street they weren't. So it was a radical transformation, and it meant that all of us came together. So in a way, because of the change, it brought together people who are property owners with tenants, and also I think across race and across class in a way that you really honestly rarely see, especially in a place like New York, because New York is so transitory and people are moving a lot of the time. I still go to a community meeting or so every now and then, and community board meeting, and I think that the key part of it, though, for me is that so much of the world that I live in has been discussed and is the product of some other decision by somebody, so I can, I know that our group worked to get a lot of street trees planted, and I can walk by those street trees. I can see an electric cable going across the street, and I know that it's feeding a construction site and they forgot to remove it, so I see a lot of things or cracks in the sidewalk because there was some construction nearby. So I'm kind of aware of the neighborhood in a hyper-conscious way, like there's a history to even these little things. And I think that comes through here, yeah.
We had a lot of conversations as we were working on the show about how a show like this, that in some ways is very New York, so urban, would land in a community like San Luis Obispo. And I was always like, no, it lands, because some of the issues that you were navigating on maybe a bigger scale, but on a neighborhood scale in New York City, are some of the conversations that happen in our community all the time, on all of our communities. I live in Morro Bay. Lots of conversations around construction and housing and how to care for your neighbors when you're in those contexts. And so to me, it actually felt like an extremely relevant show to this community.
Yeah, because in a way, my experience as an activist and just being part of the community, and we used to throw Christmas parties where we put flyers out on the street, and anybody who happened to be in the area could come for the Christmas party. We then kind of learn that the community is the people, not the buildings, but then actually also the people move away and they move on. So there's this kind of constant adjustment and kind of reevaluation. I guess it's part of everybody's life, but it maybe is a little bit more extreme in that context of being aware of so many different paths crossing and then not crossing anymore, not overlapping anymore. Yeah. But we did worry. Well, I'm not going to say we did, because I don't think she worried.
I didn't worry at all.
I thought, because I know, especially because this particular body of work is especially kind of landscape-based, this capturing the neighborhood. It's like chain link fences and other kinds of things that are just not, this is an untidy wall, it seems like, I'm just like, how is this going to fit in even in just California? And which to my mind is sunny and nice. And
we have chain link fences in San Luis Obispo and traffic cones.
I bet you have plenty of these. yeah, plenty of these. But so it's been, but it is very much, I can see so much of the change here. And, I've had a couple conversations here about change with people. And so I think it's, it's good to be aware of what you're gaining and what you're losing and try to hold on to the things that are really important. Yeah.
Maybe one or two more questions and then we'll wrap it.
So I'm looking at what's curated here, and is there any piece that when you kind of look at it again, you find yourself sort of lingering over it or pulling you back into a specific sort of like moment or something? I mean, they're all very evocative, like interstitial, as you're saying. But is there one that's, you know, maybe we should take another look at because of your own sort of like feelings or thoughts on it?
Well, I definitely look at the most recent work because I'm least familiar with it. But I think this piece, like the birds, were. I think some of them are more personal than others, and I think, yeah, there were just things in my life that were happening that I relate to with that. But I think, yeah, and I think like the seed bombs, which has kind of been so this painting over there is of a seed bomb. It's a mix of soil and clay and seeds that hardens, and it's part of guerrilla gardening. It's been something that's been done since the 1970s. And when it hardens into a ball, like a meatball, you can throw it into empty lots. And when it rains, the plants sprout, the seeds sprout. So there's a kind of a message in that means a lot to me about empowerment and claiming things that aren't yours in a way, which I think is important in life. I think it's important to kind of push against the barriers that are there.
One more question, thought? One more?
I'm from Williamsburg. The minute I walked in here, I knew where I was.
Okay, I lived in Williamsburg for 12 years.
I just have a question. Do you go around and take photographs and then do the painting, or is this all from memory?
It's photograph. They're all photos, so they're all from photos that I take, or videos too, actually, kind of a mix. They're not, by and large, they're not things that are, they're not photos that I've taken with the expectation of making art from them. Some more so than others. There's certainly sometimes themes that I'll get attracted to that I'll then keep documenting, but typically once I've touched on a theme or so, I'm kind of moved to another idea anyway. But I didn't actually intend to make this body of work, which has been going on now since 2005. So it just kind of happened because the imperative in my life turned out to be this at that time, and then it became a way to process things at the start, and then I think at the end it became a way, as it accrued over time, there's ways of connecting the work that tends to have really some, for me, powerful messages. So, like you can see a wall of works that have buds in them, like where there's a plant, and the plant is either dormant or it's growing. And that's kind of, in and of itself, means one thing, but then you've got all these barriers I talked about before, or the orange color, or even just movement. Each of those is a theme that kind of can, if you think about it, have a different kind of meaning.
I've been looking at that plastic bag by the window for months.
Yeah, they never go away. They never go away, and that,
That's the newest piece.
It is.
That just got here
Speaking
a week ago,
of-
and Allie framed it in like 4 days. So.
Yeah, she gets extra applause for that. And that one I made. It went in a box. I have not had a chance to even think about it. So speaking of processing and thinking about what I might do next, it's like, okay, that's interesting. But and that's meant to connect with the birds. I think was a key reason why I kind of fought to have a little bit of extra time to get it done, is because I thought it helped tie together a lot of the different pieces in the show, to have a bag that's kind of caught on a branch.
Yeah. Well, Peter will be around, so you can ask him all your other burning questions. But please join me in a big round of applause and congratulations to Peter. Thank you so
And
much.
she really also, Emma did a great job too. She was a great help. Yeah, in terms of the thematic structure of the show, you really helped tie it together.
It was so fun to work on it.